Hello everyone, this is Martina. Let's talk about calcium a little bit today. Calcium is one of the supplements that people do tend to use quite often, and definitely when they come to a certain age, about 50 years old, right? So let's talk about that, whether it is right or perhaps not that fortunate decision. So let's get the basics first out of the way. In terms of calcium, we obviously do need some. Calcium is important for bone strength, bone density, and teeth as well, right? So that's why are people most concerned with calcium. And as for the adult, we do need 1,000 milligrams a day. And when it comes to pregnant or nursing women or people, men and women above 50 years of age, the amount needs to increase slightly to 1,200. And that is connected to the density, bone density loss and higher risk of fractures, right? So, in order for calcium to be absorbed properly, we do need also vitamins or rather hormones D3 and K2. Both of these are referred to usually as vitamins, however, they are hormones because they are produced by our own body through certain means. And D3 is produced via ultraviolet rays, and K2 is produced in our gut through fermented eating of fermented foods, for example, right? So these two are incredibly important for calcium to be absorbed and need to be well paid attention to, because if we only focus on calcium and disregard K2 and D3, we will not be able to seize the best benefits or the most benefits of the calcium as such, right? So as for the food sources, what would be the best source of calcium? And if you're old enough, you might remember a lot of commercials and a lot of encouragement out of the overall health public authorities to consume dairy for calcium and strong bones, right? And I would not necessarily agree with this statement nowadays. And there are reasons why, and we will talk about it a little bit. But the truth is that dairy and the cow's milk in particular does contain quite a high amount of calcium. However, conventional farming and agriculture has changed a lot in the course of past perhaps 3 or 4 decades, right? And the way how the animals are raised, what are the animals fed with in particular, that all ends up in the meat, in the flesh, and in the milk. That's one topic, right? So that's why I do not encourage dairy to be consumed daily at all. And regardless of which stage of life are you really find yourself in. Now, in addition to this, obviously, as any other species, milk is being produced when there is a baby on the way or the baby has been just born, right? And for the cows and cattle, it's no difference. That means, but of course, that the milk does contain hormones as well. This milk is basically dedicated and is meant to be feeding the newborn. It's the same with human, it's the same with any other species and animal, right? When there is a milk produced, it is dedicated and meant to feed the newborn. And hence the cow's milk is too full of hormones, exactly as it would be in the human or in any other species, right? And that is the particular and most important reason why I do not encourage to consume dairy on day-to-day basis, and only if it has to be eaten exceptionally, really, really exceptionally. So we've got the milk and the cows and the cow's milk out of the way and dairy out of the way. Now, what would be the good sources other than that for the calcium to be eaten? And that would be surprisingly plants, right? Now, talking about the dairy versus the plants, yes, cow's milk does contain quite a lot of calcium. However, we are able to absorb only 30% of that calcium contained in dairy. Whereas in plants, we are able to absorb 60% of the calcium contained in plants. And which plants are those? Definitely broccoli, cabbage are two of the vegetables that are incredibly rich in calcium and really good source of calcium. Another would be chia seeds, would be almonds as nuts, and as well beans, white and black beans in particular, are a great source of calcium, right? So I'm strongly encourage these to be the main source of the calcium. And if you are unable to get enough calcium out of these sources, the plants, it would be perhaps under certain consideration and in certain circumstances wise to supplement calcium through really high quality of products or supplements, right? However, before you choose and opt this way, always try to get as much as possible through foods. And that is the best source we are having available and we can get really, right? Well, if you are, for example, about 50 years of age and you are not able to get enough calcium from the food, from broccoli, from cabbage, from beans, etc., right? Then it would be wise, as I have said, to supplement. However, be extremely mindful about the amount of the calcium you're supplementing, right? And less is better. Less is more in this case, definitely. And the rule that, or the idea rather, that more is better, it's not really valid in this case. And we have to be really mindful about the amount and go for really little. Now, why is it important? When we do supplement calcium in the larger amounts, we are really facing a risk of creating a kidney stones. Since if you take 1,000 milligrams of calcium in pill every single day, and you're not able to absorb it because you have not enough K2, you have not enough D3, for example, the calcium gets stored, and most often it gets stored in kidneys, and hence these people do have higher risk and indeed experience most often the calcium kidney stones, and that is a highly unpleasant and painful experience. And so that's why I say less is definitely more in this case. Now, if you're, for example, vegan, then you might be definitely falling into the category of not having, not being able to get enough calcium from food, and we do need the calcium, as we know, and as I have said. And hence, this would be also perhaps one of the cases when the supplementation of the calcium might be appropriate under certain circumstances, right? But as I have said, be extremely mindful about that. Now, when we eat calcium-rich food, when we do eat broccoli, and when we do eat cabbage and white beans, etc., right? Now, we have to be mindful about what is somewhat blocking absorption of calcium. As I have mentioned, D3 and K2, and exactly also phosphorus, are the compounds that are stimulating and helping absorption of calcium. However, there are also those that do the contrary, right? And they are blocking the absorptions of calcium. And that would be oxalates. Oxalate-rich foods such as Swiss chard, such as beetroot greens or spinach or kale, all these dark leafy greens are usually rich in oxalate. Now, it doesn't mean that we should not be eating these, right? Just on contrary, we have to be eating these, and we should be eating these every single day. Well, we have to be mindful, however, about combination of these food, right? And when you are eating calcium-rich food, for example, almond butter, which is, for example, one of the very fitting ways of absorbing calcium or eating calcium, then we need to be mindful not to eat it with spinach, for example, right? When we do put a little bit of almond butter, for example, in the smoothie, may very well be, right? That we do not put spinach, or we refrain from adding the almond butter into the smoothie and just leave it on, eat it in a different way, right? Just to make sure that we seize the greatest benefits we can when we do eat certain foods, right? So that might be something to think about. Now, I would stop a little bit at the hormones. I have mentioned that the dairy is unfortunately full of hormones. And not only that, but also everything which is the cattle being fed. And let's be frank and let's be honest, as far as we know, the conventional agriculture is not the greatest in terms of paying attention to our health. And it's up to us to be extremely mindful about our choices and be very educated in terms of what is happening in the conventional farming and how the ingredients list supposed to be looking like when we buy certain dairy products. Now, hormonal imbalance is something which is conventional society, Western world struggling a great deal with. And there are certain ways which we can't influence, right? Which do have a negative effect on our hormones. And that be, for example, the farming, right? The herbicide, pesticide using in farming and the agriculture. Plastics would be another one. It is nearly impossible to avoid plastic nowadays, right? We all know that. And so these are the factors which we do not have influence on, or not to the great deal. And so we have to, in the sake of our life quality and health overall, there are certain things we can influence, and that is the choices we make in terms of food, right? And so choose wisely and be educated about what do we buy, what do we eat, and whether is it good for us or not is something which we need to perhaps be somewhat better at. And so when it comes to calcium and our hormones, that's something which is extremely important. And if you live in the country or if you live in the society where cheese is your day-to-day food, right? Like, for example, Scandinavians or Northern European, Western European societies, where the cheese consumption and dairy consumption is very high, you might be reconsidering whether it is the best for you. And I can guarantee you, if you give yourself a break from dairy for a week, for example, or 10 days, you'll definitely will feel better, and you'll definitely feel a difference in terms of how you feel in your own skin and how your body works, right? So that is all for the calcium, and I think it's quite important to be mentioning it, since a lot of people are really afraid of losing bone density, and that is very much justified concern, to be honest, right? Because when we talk about the fractures, when we talk about hip fractures, for example, in a higher age, it does come with great risks of other secondary conditions connected to that, right? And the people do have hard time to recover after these kind of heavy conditions. And so the concern of not losing bone density is absolutely justified, absolutely correct. We just have to be mindful about how are we going to reach and maintain our density in terms of bones and the teeth, right? And what kind of foods can help us with that, and what kind of other factors are at play in here which we cannot really influence, right? So that's all for now, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.